Hello everyone, Forest Focus as Nottingham Forest players are in Portugal while their recruitment team try to add to the squad. In Italy, Serie A champions Napoli could scuff their hopes of signing Dan Ndoye, while back home in England, Manchester United could be willing to ruin another player's career at Forest's expense. So joining me to discuss all that and more is BBC Radio Nottingham's football presenter David Jackson. David, good to have you on with us again today. How are you?
Good, thank you. Yes, very well. Good to be back chatting to you again, Matt. It's been a little while, so glad to be here.
I know. We have to get the reference in straight away that you always come on after defeat. So being on in the summer, you can't be on after a defeat. Although we did play Monaco and get a very, very dull 0-0 draw, didn't we? But you missed that one. So yeah,
well,
good to have you with us.
I mean, pre-season friendlies every year. Colin and I Colin Frey, obviously, I work with Colin, have to remind each other to just lower expectations of pre-season friendlies, because you're just sort of waiting for them, aren't you? And excited, you sort of think, oh, there's going to be football again. And you go, no, that they never, ever, ever live up to any kind of hype, if that's the right word. Not that there necessarily is around a friendly, but all that excitement of, oh, I'm going to get to see a new signing, or they always disappoint. So maybe apart from the Mansfield 3, Middlesbrough 3 game the other night, which I heard had a bit of entertainment to it, but generally pre-season friendlies are, from a spectator point of view, a massive waste of time.
Yeah, the only ones I can remember from recent years are probably the bad ones. I think we lost 5-0 to Rennes when Doku was playing for them and we looked awful. And then last season played Millwall, and it turned out it could have been the Millwall fans playing some of the tackles that were going in. So yeah, I remember those ones. I don't remember anything good about pre-season, and I can't wait for the season to start as well.
And people read too much into them as well. Some people read so much into the result of a pre-season friendly, and you just think, what are you doing? I don't think. I mean, I don't have the stats with me, granted, but I would be absolutely amazed if results of pre-season actually correlate with how well a season is going after. A manager, I'm sure, can read stuff into it, and you might be able to look at it and go, oh yeah, Forest need options in these positions. But we know that anyway, don't we? We don't need that. I mean, if from a manager's point of view and a player's point of view, I'm sure they're very, very useful. From a spectator point of view, save your money.
I think so. I think so. Well, I did pay Forest TV to watch the Monaco game, and James Perch was saying, I've had pre-seasons where we've won them all and then lost the first game, and Gary Birtles has said the same. The only thing I think when pre-season, you can see signs sometimes. I remember Newcastle lost 5-0 to Leyton Orient in a friendly, and they got relegated that season. But unless you're getting absolutely tanked, then I think it doesn't really matter. That's what's Forest will be fine, I'm sure, either way. But they do need to sign players, David. So let's talk a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll talk in principle around these, because we're recording this at like 9:40 and the pitch will have changed by the next few hours when this comes out. But Dan Ndoye, Forest big target. Napoli, as mentioned, have made a bid, according to lots of sources, loaned with an obligation to buy. And then Gazzetta, the big Italian newspaper, say Man United would be willing to pay the whole €45 million asking fee, which is huge, 40 million quid, I guess that is. Without talking too much about the player, although do weigh in on him if you want, is this kind of par for the course now with the players we're going for? And we as fans probably need patience and probably need to brace ourselves for a few more tears in terms of missing out on targets potentially, although we could still get Ndoye, obviously, but it feels like we're in a tricky spot with some of these targets.
Yeah, I think all of this kind of goes back to really the end of last season. And we talked about it at the time on the radio, that as soon as you miss out on Champions League, you've got a problem in the summer, because Forest have had a really good year, which means your players are wanted by other clubs, which makes you vulnerable, because especially with the World Cup next year, you can't. It's harder to hold on to some of your best players, and obviously they've lost Elanga for a lot of money, and who knows how the Gibbs-White situation will end up. So you have that vulnerability. But then in order to improve on where Forest are, you're looking at competing, therefore, with players who Newcastle are after, who Chelsea are after, who, even Manchester United, it seems, because although they can't offer what some of the top teams can offer, they can offer a lot of money and a lot of history and prestige and promise for the future. So it becomes a massive challenge. Where Forest before were looking at players and maybe competing with the teams kind of mid-table, lower mid-table, they're now looking at Johan Wissa's the perfect example, where Spurs suddenly kind of, well, if Spurs want him, Thomas Frank's the manager. He knows Johan Wissa very well. That's tempting, and it's Champions League. Newcastle want him. Well, there's an established Premier League club who've obviously got loads of money and showing ambition and are going to be playing Champions League next year. So that's appealing. So if Forest are then going for that player as well, that's going to be really hard to be able to attract that player. That's just one example of that's the problem I think they're having across the board at the moment. So they're going probably for the right players that they need in order to improve their squad to be ready for a long Premier League campaign as well as a European campaign. But it's increasingly difficult to get them. And just matching the asking price, the fee is one thing, but selling the club. And yes, it's an attractive club. Yes, look at the progress they've made. There is all those selling points. Absolutely. But from a player's point of view, especially with the World Cup next year, if you've got an option of Champions League or Europa League / Conference League, that's a hard sell for Forest. So they've got a job on. I think that's why it's probably taking a bit longer this summer than we would all hope. And of course, you want these things done early and you want to be able to get players in. But it's a challenge, and it's a challenge because they had a really good season without quite getting the rewards that would be necessary to attract certain players and to be able to keep hold of certain players. It's hard.
Yeah, I agree. I think I said this on a video recently that I did around the players we're going for. It made exactly the point you made, and I feel like we probably should be going for the replacements these clubs are trying to buy, like Brentford are trying to buy Hutchinson to replace Burmo, and I feel like we could get him. Maybe we could get Harvey Elliott because the big six clubs aren't going to take a punt on him, and James McAtee, and we're probably still shopping slightly in the same area. And the other thing we discussed on Monday is the wages as well. I know you mentioned selling the club. I mean, these clubs can offer more wages, or do we break our wage structure? Hopefully with more commercial income and things like that. To do that, it feels like we're in a slightly vicious cycle, isn't the phrase, but we're in this bracket, and we've taken a big step from the Championship to the Premier League, which is probably the hardest one in a way. Now we've sort of established ourselves. I don't think we quite have, but to get to the level we want to get to is so hard because there's so much money at the top of the game that to break that sort of the next glass ceiling, and we're really seeing this summer, I think, is a huge challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about selling the club is an attractive club. I've no doubt about that, and I'm not. But I think you, as a Forest fan, you also have to be quite realistic about, and you have to go from a player's point of view. If you're looking and your agent's talking about joining an English club at the moment, for many players, Forest are absolutely the one, because I think you'd look at that. And from Igor Jesus' point of view, he looks at it and goes, well, if I'm going to move to England, I think I'd back myself to get into that team. Now, Chris Wood will have something to say about that, but from his point of view, he will back himself to get into that team. And he looks at the chances that Forest create and the way they play and goes, yeah, I can fit into that. I can score goals. I can play in European competition. This is a great way for me to get into the Premier League and play in the Premier League in a team that I've got faith in will be there for a bit. And that's great. You can absolutely, that is attractive. In terms of wages, I think that it's very difficult for Forest to match anything that a Newcastle could offer because of the difference between even Europa League and Champions League money is massive. And therefore, you can't do it. You can't. Remember back in the Nigel Doughty days at Forest, he was talking about the gamble of breaking the wage structure. And it was all about whether to sign a left back in January, and we all remember that. And the player they're looking to sign is on big wages. So if I do that, is it going to upset things? And you've got all that to contend with. I don't think that's really the issue with Forest at the moment. It's literally trying to fit within PSR. And the amount of money they'll have coming in with the Europa League, if it's Conference League, I don't know if it's going to make them money, but they are going to have to also have a bigger squad and more players. So it actually becomes logistically a challenge to be able to get a squad big enough and capable enough of competing and keep you in the Premier League and have a decent European campaign, whilst also not blowing huge amounts of money. Now, maybe the sale of someone like Elanga might just sort of help with that then they could sign a number of players and try and sort of keep the wage bill around the amount that they need to. But I think it's a game of 3D chess and a really difficult one to try and work out what to do with. I really do. I think they've got a big challenge. That said, they've got a few weeks left to the start of the season, and they, as much as Nuno likes to have a small squad, surely he is going to have a bigger squad. And what they need to do is not panic and just bring in players for the sake of it, of course, but they are going to need to sort of get quite a few in now, because what they've lost is not only a big name player in Elanga, but they've also lost a few of those players who did make up the bench, and actually a fairly strong looking bench, players like Sosa and Danilo who've now gone. They've kind of got to replace that as well. So I think they've got some work to do.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely get the signings in. I think, like you're saying, we're a great sell for players. It's just the kind of bracket of players we're selling to. Like we always pit ourselves against Brighton, Brentford, Fulham, Bournemouth, Palace, or I do anyway. And I think we're at the top of that tree now, which is great. So I think we can definitely get players in. It's just that next level of club that I was saying. If you pit us against anyone who's got Champions League football, then it's a real challenge. But I do think we'll get those players.
And they also have a great track record of finding those players. You look at Brighton, get huge credit for the players they've found and sold to Chelsea for 1,000% profit. But Forest do have a great track record of attracting that level of player. And you look at the signings they've made the last few years. I still don't think really they get the credit that they deserve for it. Yeah, they've not all been right, of course. And when you sign as many as clubs do these days, and as Forest have in the last few years, that's inevitable. But some of the signings they've made, Forest got a lot of stick. Remember when they signed Gibbs-White for the money they paid at the time, and that's proved to be fantastic business. Elanga, fantastic business. Hudson-Odoi, Chris Wood. I mean, that people were criticising that for the first few months. That's then been great business. 14 goals and then 20. I mean, brilliant. Obviously Murillo for Brazil, the contacts they've got in Brazil, the players they've been able to get out of Brazil have been fantastic. Aina on a free transfer, you'd back Forest, I think. Even Anderson. I mean, look at Anderson. Yes, they paid a lot of money, but he's worth more than that now. That's looking like a bargain, even at the big price they paid at the time. So I think you're right. I think they probably need to be looking at that kind of level and signing those players those teams who finished above them in the Premier League aren't going forward. They're not going to be able to realistically compete with those for players, unfortunately. So go for that next level. And they have a track record of getting those players and developing them and moving them on to that, raising them to the next level, because they can give them football. They can give the football an exciting environment, and they can give them European football as well. And I think that is absolutely, for me, the market they have to be going in. And they also have to be careful, because with this year coming, with a European campaign as well, Forest obviously first for a while, they've got a job on to even stay in the Premier League, because they've got such a huge amount of fixtures that if they can have a good Premier League campaign, and if they can stay in the Premier League and finish kind of mid-table-ish, even lower mid-table, that's got to represent a good year, hasn't it? For a first European campaign. I don't think anybody's realistically thinking, I'll have a good European campaign and finish top 6 or 7 again, are they? So I think you've got to plan ahead and think, well, there may not be another European campaign after this. So we've got to not chuck so much money at it that in the next few years it's not going to kind of come back to bite us. I think they've got to be a bit realistic about where they are at the moment and build on it, absolutely. But I think look at the amount of money then the teams of the Champions League are spending this summer and improving from next year. The amount of teams that will be better next season than last season. And I think you'd have to sort of say last year was tremendous. It was absolutely amazing. But I think if they finish mid-table and have a decent European campaign, surely that's got to go down as a massive success, hasn't it?
I think so. I mean, I don't think we'll be in relegation trouble personally at all. But the Leeds, Sunderland, Burnley to an extent, but Leeds and Sunderland feel like they're spending money and signing good players. And Granit Xhaka is supposed to be going to Sunderland. I think what I've said this before, one of the 17 clubs that have been more established, I think could be in bother. I don't think it'll be us, but yeah, the Premier League gets harder and harder. Certainly, I would say. And the other point I was going to make. Oh, go on. You make your point, then I'll make mine.
No. I was just going to say I agree with you. Sunderland are spending a lot of money. Leeds perhaps have got a bit more chance of staying up than some of the other teams. I'd agree with you. Sunderland spending 20 million, 30 million a time on a lot of players at the moment. Ipswich did do that, of course, and it didn't work. So it will still be very difficult for them. But they're not all going to be strong. I think, I'm looking at Spurs and thinking, well, they'll surely be better than last season. I'm looking at Manchester United thinking they'll surely be better than last season. I'm not saying they'll finish top 6 or 7, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams next year who are going to be stronger. Not all of them. Brentford have, ended up, losing a player or two this summer. Maybe more. Who knows? Norgard gone and Bumo and maybe Wissa. They and the manager. They could well end up being in trouble next year. So it's not. I'm not saying Forest are going to be in relegation trouble. I think the point I was trying to make is you look at teams when they suddenly get into Europe and the challenge they've got, you have to sort of reassess what that's going to do. Newcastle, one example of a number of clubs over recent years who, when they've gone into Europe, they've found the league has suffered as a result. Villa at the start of last season had that trouble, didn't they? Every time they played a big European game in midweek, they tended to lose at the weekend. They found it difficult. So we've got to kind of, I think, have the patience with Forest and understand they are having to also contend with that next season. That's why they need a bigger squad to be able to handle it. And hopefully they'll be able to get that over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and the other point I was going to make was, we as fans, we live in the Forest bubble and think, oh, it's really going badly for us this summer. But if you look around the Premier League, you mentioned Brentford, but Newcastle, ironically, we've been talking about them getting our targets and getting Elanga, but their fans I see are very frustrated. And there's a club, it sounds like they've missed out on a lot of players. Aston Villa the same. West Ham seems to have got weaker. I saw a Fulham fan who does a podcast, Russ, who comes on here as our opposition fan, saying, why aren't Fulham signing players? It's it's that tricky stage of the summer where it's a little bit quiet, and I do think it's going to pick up soon. So we're not the only ones in that bubble, certainly, I would say. Just before we move on, a word for the Trent Navigation. Coming up soon is the Rumble Band 13-piece, Saturday the 26th of July. Sorry, so that is this weekend, Soul, Motown and Northern Soul. So check out the Trent Navigation website or search gigantic.com for that one. And we'll mention our live show as well coming up in a couple of days. I'll put the out-of-date poster up because it says Kelvin Lewis are coming and they can't, unfortunately, but Nigel Jempson has kindly agreed to step in, and I'm trying my very hardest to get a second guest, but it'll be a good night anyway. You can win or buy. I'll raffle one shirt and I'll auction another, I think, a Callum Hudson-Odoi signed shirt and a Simon Murillo shirt, and we'll have quizzes and giveaways and stuff. So it'll definitely be a good night, Friday night, 7 p.m. at the Navs. Go to gigantic.com as well for that one. Let's talk a little bit. One more point about the squad I wanted to make as well before we get into a couple of specifics. We need the players in specific areas as well, don't we? Like the centre of the pitch feels quite good. We've got a good goalie, good centre halves. We've got 2 good fullbacks, but only 2 good fullbacks. Midfield looks pretty strong, I would say. Probably one addition. There's the Gibbs-White situation, and then strikers are good, but the wide players and the fullbacks, there's a lot of business to do there. It feels like the squad's a bit unbalanced right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and probably another keeper as well. Do you think?
Do you think they're sold on Miguel? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know, but if they are wanting to, if they were thinking of just playing Sales every game, then that's one option. But if they were thinking of maybe resting him at times in some European games, they might be looking at having another goalkeeper in there as options. I don't know, maybe. I agree with you. I think in terms of centre-backs, they've certainly got quite a few numbers. I think the centre of midfield looks okay, especially, I think, before the final few games of the season, I might not have necessarily included Sangare in it, but I think now, having seen him play those last few games as well as he did, started to really see in those final few games what he's about. Some really incisive forward-looking passes that were great, and he just looked more in control, like he was taking ownership of the game a little bit more, and I enjoyed seeing that. So, I think he can hopefully carry that on into the new season and become an important part of the team. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many positions they need. I mean, but they were a bit short. It seemed a bit short in certain areas last season anyway, certainly in terms of matching the quality that they'd got in the starting 11. In terms of strikers, yes, they've got 3 down. If you're only going to play 1 each time, then that should be okay. But I think if you were a top 6 club, you'd probably have more than that. So maybe you need someone else in that position as well. If Gibbs-White obviously is going to go, then you're going to need to rethink things. You're going to play Anderson in the 10. I really liked it when he played in the 10 last year. I really like him in that position, but that does then leave you a question mark further back. So yeah, look, they've also lost Elanga. How on earth do you replace him? Do you change style, or do you try and find someone else who's almost as fast? I don't know. I don't think you can just replace him with like Jota Silva in the team, because that completely changes how you do things. So yeah, I agree. I think certain areas they're probably okay at the moment, but they need quite a few. They need quite a few. They've only really signed a couple, and they've let quite a few go this summer. So the numbers are depleted, and particularly depleted in certain areas. I agree with you. And yeah, they've time's not necessarily running out. I've got a few. It's time's always running out, isn't it? If you're going to get philosophical about it. But they've got a few weeks. There'll be somebody who studied philosophy to say no, time isn't running out. Time's only a concept. But there we go. Sorry, I went a bit off piece.
We went a little bit existential about the life and its fragility there a little bit at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, but I like it. Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at the starting 11, I think the starting 11 still looks strong. We've only lost 1 at the moment, and
it was last year. year. The starting 11 was always good. I think then once you start to mix it up a bit too much, but that is what Forest are going to have to do next year. They're going to be playing in Europe. They will want to probably make a few changes to the team to rest a few, and they'll got Thursdays and Sundays, got a lot of midweek games. Because if you looked at the way the team was at the back end of the season, I felt there was a few players playing through niggles because they had to. If you'd have been able to give Chris Wood a couple of weeks off, or 2 or 3 weeks off, just to get himself back and then kind of hit the ground running after that, that'd have been great. But there just wasn't the option of a fully fit Taiwo to go into that position and hit the ground running in that same way. Likewise, I mean, quite a few of the players, last year, you see players coming back a bit sooner than probably they wanted to, a game or two earlier than they wanted to. And if what you really want next season is to be able to give those players that time, so that when they're playing, you've got them 100% fit. There were times, say last season, I was watching it thinking, these few players just aren't looking quite 100% at it. And I think that's because they probably picked up knocks throughout the end of a long season, but kind of just had to play, really. And that's probably what Forest are going to have to sort out. They just didn't really have the depth. Certain players they just couldn't replace, really. Gibbs-White, Elanga, Wood, players like that, they just couldn't really afford to leave out for a game or two. I mean, most positions, to be honest, you'd always want Milenkovic and Murillo. Murillo seemed to get a hamstring injury every game and then just carry on playing. I mean, it was ridiculous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's just absolutely ridiculous situation. But he, maybe that's just him, and maybe that will always be him. But ideally, and I think most clubs who are serious about challenging top end and serious about challenging in Europe would have enough options to be able to handle that, and Forest didn't quite.
Yeah, I mean, it's Nuno's way, isn't it? He sticks with his core group. He really plays that 11, and I think it worked really well for the most part. It did just put players in a tricky spot. Like if you think of, we talked about Taiwo at length, obviously, but 10 minutes here and there is tough. Sosa and Jota, it was tough on them. I suppose like Sosa had come from South America, where he was playing in his league, and he was fully match fit when he arrived at Forest, and he started quite well. But as the season went on, he probably got less and less effective because he was just coming on for 10 minutes here and there. And I think he was pretty narked by the end, based on his social media posts about Paraguay being his focus and all that. So yeah, it was tricky, certainly. I'm quite excited for Igor Jesus. It leaves Taiwo in a tricky spot again, because if Igor Jesus is getting the European minutes, poor Taiwo's only going to get 5 or 10. But it was fantastic to see him back on Saturday, as we said. But I think Igor Jesus is going to be decent. Have you got any level of excitement for him and Cunha, or is it too early to say for you?
Certainly for Igor Jesus, I think he, from what I've heard, people who've seen him play, he's got a lot to be quite excited about. And obviously, I mean, the fact he's played for Brazil. I mean, this is, let's not downplay that. It's just exciting. Forest are signing a guy who's, ward number 9 for Brazil. This is really exciting. This is so far away from where Forest were a few years ago. Is a guy who can obviously score goals. From what I gather, can hold it up. He got a bit of acceleration. He can get into spaces. He can score goals. So I'm sure, as always, there's the risk when players are coming halfway around the world that they've got to adapt to a new league and got to adapt to a different quality of opposition week in, week out. So, of course, there is always that kind of risk factor. But yeah, for him, I'm really excited. Jair Cunha, from again what I've heard, and I've not seen him play really, but from what I've heard, I think he may need to adapt to the strength of the English game a little bit more than maybe where he is at the moment. So that'll be interesting, because I think he's clearly got ability. And like I said, I would say, given Forest's other signings from Brazil, they know what to look for and what to get. So I'm sure they have absolute confidence that he'll be able to come over here and fit in. But say, just from what I've heard, I think there's just something on there that he's got to work on. But obviously, they're confident that he can. That in order to be able to compete in the Premier League, and I mean, he's going to be coming up against some of the best players in the world in the Premier League every week. So yes, I'm excited because it's 2 more young Brazilians, and so far we've had a lot of joy with Brazilians, haven't we? Didn't quite work with Scarpa. See, Scarpa seemed like the one who was most ready when he signed of all the Brazilians they've got, but it never quite happened for him. But Murillo, who we were told, had hardly played and might take a little while, just hits the ground running, and 10 minutes into his debut against Luton, smashing 60-yard passes across field, and off he goes. You go, okay, maybe he's ready then. And again, Carlos Miguel, who they say, oh yeah, he could go in and be genuinely competing for a first team spot. Hasn't happened like that, and partly because Sels has been out of this world. So I don't know, but I think having 2 young Brazilians who are clearly highly rated and signing, especially for the fee they've paid, just seems like potentially really, really good business. And Jesus from the start is the one, I think partly because he's a striker, we all get excited by signing strikers, don't we? That's perhaps the one that immediately I'm going to be excited to see.
Yeah, we spoke about earlier about markets, a market that Forest is struggling. The Brazilian one they seem to have really nailed. And I know people will say, oh, what about Scarpa and what about not Danilo to an extent, but if you get 50% of your signings, I've read articles about this, 50% of signings come off, like the degree ours have, then you're doing very well. So yeah, I've got some quite high hopes for them. Let's change tack a little bit, still on transfers, I guess, and we'll talk about Palace at the end. But just before that, I think on your Shut Up and Show More Football podcast, you and Colin were saying Forest might be willing to let the Morgan situation rumble on for a while, Morgan Gibbs-White. We've been saying there's a bit of a risk if you let it go on too long, but then equally the longer it goes on, it feels like Morgan's backed into a bit of a football corner where he might have to even stay and sign a new contract if Spurs are the only takers. So the general question is, what's your take on the Gibbs-White thing and how you think it might play out and the risks that are around that for Forest if it does go on too long? Well,
I mean, the first thing to say is the situation isn't ideal for anybody. I mean, although we say Forest might be prepared to let this rumble on, it already is rumbling on. I don't think anybody wants the situation that it currently is. A conversation around the club in the summer dominated by a player who may or may not leave. The kind of idea that there's this clause that another club could, kind of just come in and take him if they want. He's worth more than 60 million. I mean, of course he is, and that's why the club have been trying to get him to sign a new contract over the last year and hopefully get rid of that. But you always have to look at these things, from a player's point of view. I've got no issue with Morgan Gibbs-White. He's been 3 years brilliant at Forest. He's got a World Cup next year, and of course he would, I'm sure, want to give himself the best opportunity to be in that England team at the World Cup next year, because it's his best chance of playing at a World Cup, because he'll be 30 for the next one, and if he's not played in this one, if he's not had the chance to establish himself in that team over the next few years, then he could miss out on that one as well. So this is perhaps his only one, and if he's got the message from Thomas Tuchel that the best chance he's got of doing that is by playing Champions League football next year, then what can you do? He's given the club 3 good years, 3 great years, helped establish them in the Premier League and helped build them onto a team in Europe. And if he moves on after that, then that's, for me anyway, okay. 3 years in modern football's a decent return, especially when he's played as consistently well as he has. Yeah, it's a real shame if Forest don't get the money that they actually should get for him. In terms of the situation as it is now, yeah, not ideal at all, because I think then that rumbles on into August and you start to worry about whether it's going to kind of go to deadline day and all the talk of that. Do you want a player who's, I'm loath to say unhappy, because I don't think he is unhappy. I think he's very happy at Forest, and I think he enjoys his football at Forest. I think he likes his teammates. I think he likes the club. I think he loves the fans. He loves everything about it. But he's just also got to marry that with his best chance of, in his one career, of maybe getting a one chance to play in a World Cup, and that, to me anyway, is reasonable. I know a lot of fans don't feel the same way. So yes, Forest don't want it to Forest obviously don't want to just kind of just be done with it and sell, because what would they, what would they get out of that? They just suddenly have loads of money in the bank. Everybody knows they need a replacement, and they've just lost one of their best players. They want to do everything they can to keep him, because he's central to everything they do on the pitch, or pretty much. So I think they do want to keep him, and I think if they can convince him that he can achieve everything he wants to achieve, and maybe do it in the Europa League, then maybe there's a scenario out of that. Then again, if somebody else comes in, because it seems like they're not talking to Spurs, so if somebody else comes in and offers 70, 80 million, or I don't know, maybe if Man City came in with a swap deal involving McAtee that was favourable to Forest, they will actually, do you know what? We'll let him go and have his Champions League football that he wants, and we'll get a huge amount of money and somebody who can, who sort of fits in with the sort of player that we're after as well. Then maybe there'll be a happy resolution. But I think, although they'd be happy to have it rumble on in one sense, I think also you don't want suddenly a last-minute sale on deadline day. So I think you've got to kind of find some solution in the meantime as to what the best thing is for everybody. And at the moment, I don't think anybody knows what that is.
No, I think you're right. I think the Man City solution probably appeals to the, I don't know, but I imagine, putting two and together, the McAtee sort of swap deal probably appeals, but it's whether City will take him. So we'll wait and see. It's
also from Gibbs-White's point of view, again, as where's he going to go? He's got to go to a club that's going to give him the best chance of playing in a World Cup next year. That I'm sure is,
and he's got to be playing for that club that he goes to. Correct.
So. I mean, if I was Gibbs-White, I'd be looking at somebody like Grealish who's gone there and think, well, is that going to happen to me? Am I going to go and play hot? Is that where I can go, establish myself, play all the time? At Forest, the clubs are based around him. The team's based around him. The style of play is based around his energy to be able to carry the ball out and lay the ball out to the wingers and create openings. If he goes to Manchester City, it won't be. So that might require a period of adjustment. It might mean because of their Manchester City, he might not play as much as he wants to. Spurs, I would think he probably would play, and they probably would. They need to change anyway this year. They've got a new manager in, so he can probably feels he can become central to that. And I'm sure he'd back himself to play well in the Champions League and get himself into that England team. But he's got to pick carefully. It's a big summer for him. It's a massive summer for him with a World Cup coming up next year. You know, Steve Hodge, who we have doing the Radio Nottingham commentary with us, he left Forest in '85 to join Villa, because at Forest he was being played out on the left wing, and he thought his best chance of playing for England in the World Cup was in a central midfield position. So he needed to go somewhere where he could play in that position and play regularly and get himself in. So he made the move to Villa, and it worked for him. And he got himself into the World Cup in '86. And that's what players do. You know, it's not Steve Hodge is a Forest fan who grew up in Nottingham. It's not disloyalty. It's about, you've got one career, you've got 10 years. You might get to play at a World Cup. And that's what gave him that opportunity. And there he was then, you know, the rest is history, as they say. But that's what's motivating a player. And I think any fan that starts sort of shouting loyalty at them, you know, and calling him a snake and calling him anything else needs to just get realistic, really.
You might end up with Diego Maradona's shirt if you make that move to Aston Villa. Yeah, there you go.
There's your retirement fund.
Yeah, and the only thing I was going to say about Morgan and City, although I don't know if we would go there, when players go to City that first season, Guardiola tends to ease them in and not use them as much. And if he's going to World Cup year, then that doesn't work. I said this on the podcast last night. That I'm not trying to sell Morgan here. I want to stay, obviously, but I think he'd do well at a club like Arsenal alongside Rice and Odegaard, playing a different role in a midfield three. But yeah, I do think, I said this last night, his options, if Spurs don't take him, are running out a bit. So I wonder if he might. I think he will ultimately go, because it feels like a lot of water's gone under the bridge. But maybe there's a scenario where he signs a new contract and plays for us in the Touchwood, the Europa League. We shall wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. I mean, when we eventually find out which European competition Forest will be in, if they are Europa League, maybe Thomas Tuchel will say to him, because he's got a big part to play in this, Tuchel. You know, if he says, you'll be fine there, you'll play regularly, you'll get Europa League football, that play well in that, and that'll be fine. But yeah, I don't know if he's going to say that or not. I don't know what Tuchel's thinking around that is.
Well, no, he's been. You work for the BBC. You can't say it. Tuchel's been a bit of a pain in the arse by the sound of it. So, but the Europa League's certainly a good platform for players if we're in it and playing clubs like Roma and things like that. Touchwood. We'll get on to Palace very quickly. I was just had a quick hoover up of the transfer rumours while before we started talking to David. I'll just talk about. Won't even address this. Some really fanciful ones I've just seen. Mark Gahey, Ademola Lookman. Christopher Nkunku I saw yesterday. I mean, they'd all be fantastic, obviously, but I just can't see that level of player signing for all the reasons we discussed at the top of the show around competition for them and wages in Nkunku's case. So, yeah,
I mean, I think it'd be very amusing if Forest were to sign a player from Palace because they've got into the Europa League.
Their best player, yeah. Well, second best for their sake.
I'm not quite sure. Avenues of conversation would be.
Yeah, what's the asking? Yeah, there's the other club's asking price and there's the Forest asking price if you go for a Palace player. So yeah, I thought I'd mention that. Let's talk about Palace then. They've appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS. Report saying that we'll hear by at the latest August the 11th, but possibly before. It feels like it needs to be before, doesn't it, David? That's a week before the season starts.
Yeah, and not long before the first European game.
Yeah.
So we're gonna potentially have a position where the draw's made, and we're gonna have an either or in the draw. It just feels like it needs as quick a resolution as possible. And Palace are obviously throwing everything at it and launching that appeal, which mentions both Lyon and Forest. I think they're like, just kick one of them out. We don't mind which, but just kick one of them out, and just kind of making sure they've covered all bases, I think, in their appeal, just to give themselves every possible chance of it being overturned. But I mean, I have to say, and this might not be a popular thing to say to on a Forest podcast, but this isn't really what you want out of football, is it? It's feels a bit like scoring a goal and then VAR making you wait 5 minutes for the decision. This is like Palace win the FA Cup, which was a joyous moment, and then kicked out of a competition because of an email. And it just shows. I'm not saying therefore they shouldn't be, but I'm just saying it's just like it's just another one of those examples of modern football where the footballers do their thing and then something else takes over and it just makes it all a bit, is that really what modern football is now? Like they won the FA Cup. They won the FA Cup, therefore they should be in that. But the way modern football is, because multimillionaires and billionaires have figures in different pies in different clubs, you've got all this administrative nightmare around it, that ends up becoming what matters. And it's the same as, Forest do everything they can to try and stay up, and then they have points deducted because they sold Brennan Johnson a bit later than earlier. And you're like, oh, come on. Like, the players are doing everything they can on the pitch. And that's just what modern football is. And that's just a general grumpy old man complaint about the fact that modern football is such that whatever happens on the pitch has an asterisk because of what might have happened off it, and might be to do with the owners and the boardroom and an email address and all of that. That said, that's just a grumpy old man complaint generally about this whole situation. That said, the rules are there, and UEFA have decided that they didn't comply with their rules on it. Now, as much as Palace fans then protest and shout about Marinakis for highlighting it and shout about UEFA, if UEFA and if CAS deemed that the rules were just set out in stone and they didn't abide by them, then I think that frustration, if I was a Palace fan, I think I might be aiming it, if that's what's deemed by CAS as, you're out, I think that frustration has to also then be aimed at the Palace board, doesn't it, for just making the mistake in the first place and for allowing this to happen. That's their job, and they can say, oh, it's only 43%, he didn't have a controlling stake or whatever. But the rules are in UEFA about how much you can own without needing to take these measures, and he owns more than that. So it's there in black and white. But is it the way you'd want to qualify for competition? No, just the same as you want to score a goal and just celebrate it straight away. You don't want to have to wait 5 minutes before you get the go ahead to celebrate it by somebody sat in Stockley Park. But that's modern football, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I was discussed this with Fletch a few weeks and months ago on the podcast about, like, football's amazing on the pitch. I don't know if you watched the England women game last night. That was great. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was really good. But then you see, like, all the off-field stuff we discussed this week, and it's not just Forest, but there's pretty eye-watering offensive ticket prices. They're very high across the board. There's loads of stuff. I was really, this is off-piste, but the Club World Cup, DAZN, who have a Saudi backers, pay £1 billion the ticket, the TV rights when there's no one contested, and then Saudi Arabia's got the World Cup and all that. Suddenly it feels like just the money, and we're more aware of it as well, the money these days, I think, because of social media and the expansion of media. We spent time on the podcast talking about the loan that Forest have taken out and the interest rate around it. Maybe 30 years ago, we wouldn't even have known about this as fans. So I think that's part of the changing picture. But yeah, modern football is modern football, I guess.
It is. I mean, really, it is what happens on the pitch that's the most exciting. And last night, Chloe Kelly's extraordinary penalty technique, which I've seen her do a few times, and that great. It's just something a bit different, and some, really weird kind of lifting that left leg up really high before she sort of trots in to take the penalty. And they would normally, 30, 40 years ago, would be the big talking point of the next day of, penalty techniques maybe, and it would be talked about the football. And instead what we talk about is emails and multi-club ownership and all of that. And it just feels like a bit of a shame. But that said, it's a shame that Forest can actually take advantage of, which is good, because they've had things go against them where they've similarly, I mentioned the Brennan Johnson one, where they've gone, well, okay, that is your rules, but come on, look at your rules, and is that right? And is this really what PSR is meant to be doing? These are homegrown players. Why are you kind of making us sell players cheap, and your rules are wrong? And that kind of feels like the argument that Palace are making here, saying, okay, that's your rules, but come on, maybe the rules need relax.
You're not going to win that in court, though, are you?
I don't think you are. No, I think that's right. And Forest didn't win that one. about the PSR, but actually that was their argument, was like, come on, this is surely within the spirit of what you're trying to do. This doesn't feel right. And it feels like that's what Palace are saying. Yeah, okay, we missed the deadline, but come on, this is football. We had a romantic trip to the FA Cup final, we won, and we didn't know we were going to win, and please forgive us, and we won't do it again. But it's black and white, and they're the rules, and that's tough, of course. But like I say, I just think it's a shame that so much of football is played out in courtrooms, overshadowing what happens on the pitch. Because I was so happy for Palace when they won the FA Cup. It was great, even though it impacted on Forest, of course, because Man City winning it would have helped. But there was something joyous about just seeing Palace fans who'd not had anything like that. They got to experience the FA Cup. I went back in my mind to when Forest went to Palace, final day of the first season back, and what a great day that was. With the Forest fans just celebrating in fancy dress over in the corner, and the Palace fans were amazing that day, and Taiwo scored a great goal. And it was just a really good day. And I thought, I like this club. I like the ground. I like the field. They'd finished mid-table, but they were ecstatic. They were happy. And I just thought that I like them. I like them as a club. I like them as a fan base. They've got some really good players, exciting players. And it was exciting to see a different team win the FA Cup. And then for the summer just to be dominated by such sort of boring off-field discussion is necessary, and in some ways interesting, but not. It's not football, is it? Do you know what I mean? Maybe am I just being a grumpy old man? Matt, tell me if I am. He wouldn't be the first, but it sort of feels. That's what it feels like to me.
I think you're right. I mean, when we were kids, we didn't get into football and think, our team's won the FA Cup. Now what happens in the court hearings around multiple ownership when I was 8 years old and things like that. So, no, you're right. I think Palace are right. Morally, they're right, but they're not going to win the appeal. It's like in cricket, there's been a contentious wicket, like a mankad or something, and they're saying you've got to withdraw the appeal. It's not in the spirit of the game. And a court of arbitration for sport isn't going to hear that argument. So I think they'll lose, and Forest will end up in the Europa League, and we'll take it, but gladly.
Absolutely. In exactly the same way as the other teams in the Premier League were happy to take it when Forest had points deducted. Yeah. So, absolutely. And this is going to be, potentially really good for Forest, and it'll help them. And they abided by the rules. Forest spoke to UEFA before the actual deadline and said, this is what we're going to do. UEFA were happy with it. They went away and they put their thing in place with the blind trust. So they've done what was required of them. And from what UEFA have said, Palace didn't. Therefore, they're the rules. That's what has to happen. And yeah, I haven't got a problem with it in a way. I just think it's worth kind of remembering when you're a football fan of, let's not cheer court cases and email addresses. Let's cheer the goals and actually kind of try and kind of on a bigger scale just enjoy. Just remember that it was great for Palace, that and just I do feel for the fans. I makes me a Palace fan, and I can't help but just think, well, it's kind of dampened what was the most joyous day at Wembley of that FA Cup final, and that's a shame, really, that the modern football administration has done that.
Wait till how your mate feels when we sign Mark Gahey. He won't be very happy.
and to be honest, if they are in the Europa League, I'm going to enjoy absolutely every minute of going to all of those games, and Forest are there because according to the rules by which they operate, they would deserve to be there. So I'm not undermining that. They would absolutely deserve to be there because they're the rules. And if they've abided by them and another club hasn't, then they are absolutely there by right. And I'll look forward to every single one of those trips.
Yeah, that'll be amazing. There'll be a lot of jealous people when you and Colin and Steve or James or whoever it is are off around Europe with you, certainly. Just before we wrap up and throw it to David for final thoughts, thanks very much for Vesta Blinds for sponsoring us, second sponsors today. VestaBlinds.com if you're looking for made-to-measure blinds or shutters across the East Midlands and specifically in the Notts area. David's got some nice blinds there, I can see, and they look very stylish. So check out VestaBlinds.com.
Very cheap. Mrs.
Jackson won't like saying that at all.
Right. When we did this house, we had to do this house very, very quickly. So there's a lot of things in here that were a cut price. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but yeah, I should have just said thank you. Thank you. Yes, they're very nice blacks.
Yes, they're very nice. I should edit this out, but I'm not going to. It's good stuff. Was it Homes Under the Hammer doer upper then when you got it?
It was a lady had lived in here ever since the house was built in the 50s. If you really, I don't know whether the podcast has changed now. If we're on to house renovation podcast, house renovation focus, and I mean, it needed it. The whole electrics, I took off the light and all the light kind of thing just crumbled away. So yeah, we've had to do an awful lot in a very short space of time. We still had the Stanner stair lift on the stairs when we moved in, just to give you an idea of how much work it's been. Yeah, it's been a lot of work to get it up to bang average.
Did you have a golden stair lift?
I don't think we did. We've got very young kids who were more making sure that they didn't go anywhere near it, because the teeth on it at the bottom, they're quite sharp. You know that it goes up. You wouldn't. No. 5 or 6 years before you need this map, but it's kind of got. It's got like.
If I swore then I would have had to edit this out, but I didn't.
The teeth, like, they're quite sharp. So we moved in with a 2-year-old and a 2-week-old. So it was more just get this thing out quickly. That's not what I expected to be talking about. But I don't mind it. I'm all for it, Matt. I'm all for this kind of random discussion. More of this, please. More of this kind of thing.
Well, this is the benefit of long form podcasts over, other. I'm going to slag it. This sounds like I'm denigrating radio there for shorter interviews, and I'm definitely not. But
I will happily talk about Stanner stair lifts on the radio. I will not. I shouldn't be giving undue prominence to Stanner. I don't know if there's other companies that make stair lifts. So it's just.
I'm sure there are. We can advertise here. Get in touch, Stanner.
If you get sponsored by a stair lift company off the back of this, I will be thrilled for you.
Well, you'll want to cut. Yeah, we should end this because I said to David, we're 40 minutes and we've done 52. We moved into our house when our son was 2 days old, and same sort of thing. It wasn't as needed as much work as yours, but the dining room floor was shocking pink. It was, I don't know who paints a floor shocking pink, and it had a rug over it, and then underneath the rug it wasn't painted, so the rug must have been permanently there. It was just the wooden floor. Someone who listens to this and is a channel member knows the people who lived here before, so I hope it doesn't get back to them. Right, let's end it there. But David, any plug for your podcast? What would you and Cole talk about now to compete with this? Give us a plug for it.
I mean, who knows? We could talk about walking frames. I suppose we could do anything like that. If we need to talk about anything like that. I mean, Colin and I guess we'll be talking about Europe a lot. I think it's kind of a big talking point. Colin went to has been to a couple of friendlies now to see Forest play. Went at the weekend. Spoke to Ola Aina after and Taiwo Wonyi. So you'll hear those on the podcast and hear what they had to say after the games of the day. We'll chat to Colin about friendlies and stuff like that and get his thoughts on the situation where Forest are at the moment. So that'll be later on. But just as a quick final thought, I realise we've talked quite a lot, haven't we, about what Forest haven't got. But there is still a lot of reasons to be excited about what Forest have got at the moment. Matt Sells has just kind of signed improved terms. Got the Golden Glove winner, or one of the Golden Glove winners of last season. Ola Aina's signed on as one of the best fullbacks in the division. Nico Williams, brilliant. Murillo, absolutely tremendous. Surely will kind of, get back into that Brazil side. Milenkovic, superb. Elliot Anderson, look at the progress that he's made. So, yes, there's a bit of negativity, and understandably, about kind of wanting more players in, but when you actually look at what Forest have got, I think there's also a lot of reasons for optimism. It's just building on what is already good, really good, with a potential of it. A lot of those players getting even better. There's some brilliant young players still in that team. So although one has gone and maybe another one is, might go, there's still a lot to be excited about with Forest.
Yeah, like we were saying, the 10 out of the first 11's in place, and a couple of years ago, we had a lot of players who were much of a muchness, and we've elevated the 11 and we just, the next level is the next project. But it's a very strong place to be in. I'd rather be in the place where you've got 10 out of your 11 you would very happily take in almost any Premier League team than having 30 players who, you know, you've only probably got 5 or 6 of the 11 are nailed, which is probably where we were when we first got promoted. So we've made huge strides. I think we always want a bit more as fans, and we always want it now. And I think we're going to have to be patient around Dan Ndoye and these signings. But yeah, the base is very strong. And we'll see how it all develops in the next few weeks, certainly. So yeah, listen to more of that with us. Back tomorrow with Mikey and Greg talking transfer news. Probably Mikey's more on the negative side of the ledger, and Greg's the ultimate positive. And then Friday with Chris Cohen is the plan. Saturday post match, and you can all. I'm sure you can hear that. Can you hear that on the radio? The friendly?
No.
Call out there. No,
we're not. Like I say, we've sort of about 20 years ago, we learned our lessons with doing commentaries on friendlies.
Yeah. On the radio.
We don't do them anymore.
Yeah. And the ball goes square to the central defender, and it goes back to the keeper.
His try list passes it down the wing to try list B. So no, we don't bother with friendlies anymore. Every year we get complaints from people saying, "Why aren't you doing it?" And then the game ends 0-0, and you know there's about 8 B team players in there, and they go, "Yeah, all right, fair enough." You know, nothing wrong with the B team, of course, but you know that's not like I say. The expectation of what you're going to hear is very different to the reality of a pre-season friendly. So no, we don't do the friendlies anymore.
Well, you'll be able to hear all the Premier League games and Cup games on Radio Nottingham, and you can hear Shut Up and Show More Football. So do check that out. Do join us tomorrow, as mentioned. If you've enjoyed this one, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider membership. If you're a member, you'll have early access to this conversation, and then we'll put it out later today, in which case Dan Ndoye could be assigned for anyone, or consider Patreon as well, or just a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. David, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
For 56 minutes when I told you 40, you're very generous with your time. But
I just ramble on, mate. I mean, to be honest, we probably were at 40 before conversation turned to house renovations. So I'm happy, mate.
But the sad part is people might well think that's the best part of the conversation.
Yeah, probably.
My wife said you need to diversify the podcast. So
there you go. Happy to help.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your company. If we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.